On 12 November 1932, a British Army major named G.P.W. Meredith stood in a dusty field in Campion, Western Australia, aimed a Lewis machine gun at a stampeding wall of giant birds, and pulled the trigger. The gun jammed, the emus scattered, and the Australian government quietly pretended the whole thing never happened. This was not a folk tale. This was official military policy. What your history teacher never told you is that the Australian government actually deployed combat soldiers, with military-grade weapons, against a flock of emus. And after several weeks of sustained armed conflict, the birds were winning. Here's why this story got buried. When a modern nation-state loses an engagement against wildlife, the official response is silence. The Australian House of Representatives debated this operation on the floor of Parliament. Veterans groups were furious. Not because the emus were being killed, but because the operation was so catastrophically ineffective that it was an embarrassment to the entire military apparatus. So let us go back to the beginning. It was 1932. Australia was deep inside the Great Depression. The government had promised land grants in Western Australia to veterans of the First World War. These men had survived the trenches of Gallipoli and the Western Front. Now they were farmers in the Campion district, growing wheat, struggling to survive a collapsing economy. Then the emus arrived. Every year, approximately 20,000 emus migrated through Western Australia after their breeding season. In 1932, they descended on the farmlands of Campion in extraordinary numbers. They smashed through fences. They destroyed crops. They drank the water meant for livestock. For veterans who had already given everything to their country, this was a catastrophe they could not absorb. The farmers petitioned the government. And the government's response was remarkable. They sent the army. Specifically, they sent Major Meredith of the Royal Australian Artillery with 2 soldiers, 2 Lewis guns, and 10,000 rounds of ammunition. The logic seemed airtight. 20,000 birds against 2 machine guns. Military planners estimated the operation would be over in days. What happened instead became one of the most astonishing military humiliations of the 20th century. On the 2nd of November 1932, Meredith attempted his first engagement near a dam where emus had gathered. His plan was to wait until the birds clustered together and then open fire for maximum effect. But the emus refused to cooperate. As soon as the shooting started, they scattered into small groups and ran in every direction. The Lewis guns cut down some birds, but the flock dissolved before any sustained damage could be done. Meredith reported that the emus seemed to operate with a kind of tactical awareness, breaking formation the moment a threat appeared. Then the guns started jamming. The feathers and dust of the Western Australian outback were clogging the mechanisms. On one attempt, the guns jammed after firing only 12 rounds. The soldiers spent more time clearing their weapons than firing them. If this surprised you, subscribe right now. This channel covers the history they never put in your textbook. The stories with real consequences and real absurdity. Now here is the layer that makes this even stranger. An ornithologist later argued, seriously, in an academic context, that the emus displayed what appeared to be coordinated retreat behavior. When fired upon, the flock would split into smaller groups, making concentrated machine gun fire almost useless. Major Meredith himself told a journalist, quote, "If we had a military division with the bullet-carrying capacity of these birds, it would face any army in the world. They could face machine guns with the invulnerability of tanks." Read that quote again. A British Army officer publicly compared emus to tanks. By the 18th of November, just 12 days into the campaign, the Australian government suspended the operation entirely. The press had been covering it with increasing mockery. One headline called it a war. A member of parliament suggested the major should be given a military decoration, sarcastically. The ornithologist from the earlier report suggested that each emu seemed to have 2 lives. Official tallies are disputed. The military claimed approximately 2,500 kills. Independent estimates suggest the number was far lower. Given that 10,000 rounds were expended, the numbers revealed a kill rate that was genuinely shocking for military hardware of that era. The emus continued their migration. The crops continued to suffer. Farmers petitioned again the following month. Meredith returned in December of 1932 and conducted a second campaign that was, by the government's own admission, only marginally more successful. Operations continued sporadically until 1948. The emus were never controlled militarily. The government eventually shifted to subsidizing fence construction instead. Here is what this event means for the world today. The Emu War is not just a funny story. It is a case study in what happens when governments reach for the most aggressive solution available without understanding the nature of the problem. Military force deployed against a decentralized, adaptive, fast-moving opponent produces exactly the outcome Meredith experienced in Campion. The weapon is powerful. The target refuses to stand still. Historians who study counterinsurgency doctrine have actually cited the Emu War, without irony, as an early example of asymmetric conflict. A rigid, centralized force deploying heavy firepower against a distributed, mobile opponent that absorbs damage and keeps moving. The emus did not have a headquarters to destroy. They did not have a supply line to cut. They just had 20,000 individual survival instincts pointed in 20,000 different directions. Australia built better fences. The emus still migrate through Western Australia every year. And Major Meredith, when asked about the campaign in his later years, never expressed regret. Only a kind of stunned professional respect for the bird that beat him. The history they taught you was built around human victories. Subscribe to this channel because we cover the moments humans lost, and what those losses actually taught us.